All my warnings were ignored. Century after century, I'd warned them they would take one more transgression too far. A whisper rather than a scream. A blight there, or a rising sea level, or species lost far too soon. They'd watch countless others perish at their hands, or through their negligence. All warnings that their own fates were on the line. Their children's children would live a harsher life than they, until the final one would decline. Humankind has always been arrogant, gifted with ingenuity and an arrogance of the old gods. Their inventions were the cause of their undoing. Advancing to a point, they no longer believed they were dependent on the seasons, forgetting that they too are part of the natural world, at one time granted the gift of fire as an act of mercy, while they roamed in a dangerous world without a worthy fang, claw, nor a natural talent at protection. They were more often than not mere prey. They rose, building villages that grew into cities with widespread communities, shaping the natural world to their needs, creating dams, clearing marshes, cutting down trees. They used wood and stone, touched by fire, only to finally shape the crudest bronze swords, arrowheads and spears to create weapons to wage war on each other, using animals who joined them as friends and allies in peacetime and war. Others had their spirits broken as beasts of burden. Countless of them died for humanity to rise. Later developments of their technology brought about new diseases, stronger ones they had no immunity for, creating items designed solely for destruction that crippled their minds in their quest for their own godhood, no longer needing to use their minds for their tasks, their usage polluting their environment with chemicals from the earth and ones they combined for industries for their vanity. And now, it was the end. The great bounty of the earth twisted and pulled, always pushed to the extreme until I will give no more. The soil now degraded, with the complex flora and fauna having perished from excessive farming on a global scale. Demand only increased and warnings were ignored, never allowing the earth to rest, and only adding more pesticides to the ground, tipping the balance beyond repair. The plant life began to wither. Forests receded until there was nothing left but shells of tree trunks and an endless sea of what was green, now grey. The air became painful to breathe. Special machines needed to be used, with only the elites able to afford them near the end. The crops used to feed themselves, and the beasts bred from those who roam freely failed. The waters soured, and no matter how many cleansing chemicals were pumped into it, it provided no quenching of thirst. It was simply another industry, only heightening the need for more water, yet only a parched feeling remained. A mouthful of relief, then nothing. All except needing more. Over the coming months it became poison. A punishment without a place of reprieve. There were oases surrounded by a dying world. A series of newfound Edens, where water was fresh, air was clear, and food was plentiful. Paradise. With only a few rare places where people could find clean water or the ability to grow food, competition grew in intensity. People resorted to weaponry of old, spears and clubs after modern weaponry failed, ignoring the failing planet surrounding them. Fields of grey crops fell to ash. The few bony animals cried out into the night, and the winds offered them solace before the humans slaughtered them for nourishment. Even those blades of grass were lost from all the concoctions, and it too turned into another polluted wasteland. There was not enough to go around, and akin to any species, but especially mankind, they started tearing each other apart. Old alliances meant nothing, so long as those close to them gained food or water. Nation after nation in a dance ending, with one falling after another while paradise receded, inch by inch. They had drained the world of their ammunition factories. The end result left cities uninhabitable, once home to millions of people, those they hadn't already bombed. Those were filled with the mindless who wandered aimlessly, their minds no longer their own. What use was money when you had no water, no food, no air, and still they chased wealth, empty shells of silent life clinging to it as buildings fell into disrepair. It should have taken countless generations before these places would be livable. Even family, cousin against cousin, sibling against sibling, and finally, parent against child. Too blinded by their greed to notice, too vain and stupid. Woe to the vanquished. Soon, barely 100 humans remained out of millions lost in barely 100 years. And still, the wars raged on. People made alliances to dead or dying nations, or allegiances to forsaken gods. They still fought on. The plants and remaining animals wailed in response, while they perished for sins not their own. A starving dog reached out with her muzzle toward me, too drained to communicate, and my finger touched her nose. Silently, I promised them a new life after all the pain. She passed away peacefully with many others of her kind, and others. Their remains sank into the earth, a long slumber to rest and prepare themselves for when the earth would be born anew, and they would be free. Once it was done, all the chaos and the killing, all that remained was a sad slip of green in an endless sea of decaying dust. The paradise, the lost oasis, where the most brutal fighting was done and the only human sanctuary. An act of final mercy for them. An opportunity to change, even after all they had endured, and still they fought on, too small a number to sustain their own population. Their children would not be viable. With broken weapons in hand and their fists, fighting broke out, leading to the near extinction of mankind. I felt all their bodies resting on my form. Every species passed away, became extinct, but theirs was well before their time. They knew it was coming. The last human died with their already deceased child's hand in theirs, while the other caressed a single blade of grass. A Pyrrhic victory before they breathed their final breath. The winner, if you could call it that. They were too blind, to a point they didn't even realize their child had passed away before they did. And thus, humanity's reign on Earth ended. Soon the remains rotted, giving the air a foul stench. A world where the living was no more. Creation and renewal could only come through decay and destruction. I walked through the timeless plains, step after step in a personified form upon the earth, my flesh on flesh, able to see through their eyes the destruction they had inflicted upon themselves. Other than my whispers of the earth, the world had become eerily silent, and I missed those who walked with me. It was not the first temporary setback of humankind. They would rise once more. Of all the forms I could have taken that walked or swam through the oceans, I chose the one that caused me the most grief. The ones most like the gods. I left pieces of the old world behind, warnings for the future, and better ways of maintaining balance with the land. Old snippets cast in stone of how to manage it. Clues of past struggles as warnings that would be faced. These were deep within the rocks of riverbeds of tides rising too high or dropping too low. Old writing in a variety of languages, pictograms, and drawings. Most I knew would be lost forever. Some simplistic and others more complex to increase the chances it would be understood, combined with precious metals to increase their chances of being found. I hoped they would. A final, cleansing flame burst through and devastated all that was left. I burnt them all to the ground. The remaining forests and fields were destroyed. The dust itself sizzled. The toxic smoke pumped into the atmosphere, filling it with dark, grey clouds. They had brought hell upon themselves. Volcanoes burst, causing liquid fire to trail over the planet, creating a blanket of fire and leaving a fertile base that would bloom in a long period of time. Time. A blink for me and a million years on Earth passed. Continents were reforged through the Earth's tectonic crust and flames from down below. New beings rose. Intelligent, yet humankind kept rising. The spirits of the deceased creatures were reborn from the oceans and the land where they had perished long ago. Each time they looked slightly different. Taller or shorter, different builds, and I waited. Human-like, but not quite. They too were given the gift of fire to see how they treated innocents, to give them a chance against the chill of night. They built their early cities, gave birth to gods to suit their needs, and guide them throughout the natural trials of life thrown in their direction. And I sensed them. Each clan soon sought out others. The first meetings were peaceful and promising. An exchange of gifts given, and it was my time to rest, leaving the world to rise and fall with the regular seasons. They kept up their prayers and sacrifices when winters were too long or summers too great, when their livestock were sickly or to ensure the next generation grew healthy, when the earth crumbled and threatened to expose the jewels of the past. Yes, it was time. My time to rest. My personification merged back inside the ground, curling up into the shape of a mountain, and over time, birds and wildlife made their home inside my body. Plants and vines crept over, coating my body in a layer of green. My dreams were filled with what the world could have become. A humanity and the natural world living in balance with each other. A cycle of giving and receiving, the way things should have been. The old writing and pictures were found and eventually studied, treated with reverence. The warnings of water levels dropping, of farming too intensely without permitting the earth to rest and respecting the forest around them. They built their cities in line with nature, combining it with technology, focusing on growth rather than profit, and the warnings were heeded. For the first time, they actually listened. My dreaming flowed. A near-silent song rang out. New species were born from others or evolved, sent into the world and left to wander. There was a constant buzz of technology and hustle of movement, of new songs and music, the song of millions of voices together. The noise died one day, completely out of the blue, and again, my form awoke, only to see the world was barren. The life had disappeared. The voices of the children were gone. The machinery no longer made sound, and all their transportation through land sea and air had stalled. It had all come to a stop. My personification walked once more, heading to the cities that had been filled with people, and I stood in awe of them, higher than mountains, filled with nothing but an empty shell. There were no bodies on the ground, no signs of a struggle or a war typical of humans throughout time. I shrank down from my gigantic size down to their own, all to walk through the halls of their grandest buildings, hallways where they marked their achievements, a celebration of culture, language, scientific reform, and a fascination with knowledge. Not once was there war, no disasters through negligence. The expectation of disaster falling flat was a pleasant disguise, until I found the giant crevice, a massive hole in the ground. Mountains would have filled inside it, and it was bigger than any structure humanity had ever constructed in all of their revivals. I remembered dreaming of a large structure built here. It had taken them a great deal of time to achieve it. Generations passed before the dream was finally realized. There were coarse, burnt marks at the base. The realization set in that they, my children, they had left for the stars, leaving the earth that grew and sustained them behind. There was no pollution nor blight, and they traveled out into space beyond my touch. All they left was a message that one day they would return. In all their records, I couldn't find why. The earth had been a paradise for them, their own little Eden, and they sought to leave. Up into the wilds of space where my voice would not reach them. Their vulnerability would surely be exploited. Into the void of an eternal night, out among challenges well beyond their understanding. Species greater than gods roamed in space. Most were unkind. I doubted they as a species would survive the transition, or would change over time, twist their minds and bodies into something else, either ascending to become greater, or devolving into nothingness. I mourned their loss, yet they were not my only children who would rise. The world's cycle turned, and another crawled out from the ocean, 8-legged with the ability to communicate and heal their bodies after their mother would give birth, an adaptation their ancestor did not possess. Intelligent like the species that walked among them, they had clans of their own and took residence inside the homes of humanity. They saw them as gods, their predecessors who'd protect them from harm. They spoke of them at births, marriages, and funerals, asking random humans for the benefit of their bounty and steadfast protection. I did not enlighten them, as humankind did the same to shape their own world. The 8-legged ones managed to get the power working. Each city was settled, and over time, they forgot the peaceful teachings of their gods. A desire for control over the oceans rose. The place they would often return to, briefly for their health, became associated with status. Only the highest ranked or most wealthy could travel there. The elite. They built walls to keep the less fortunate members of their society out, citing environmental concerns while polluting it. I reduced the populations of sea life as a warning, only to have the restrictions increase. Truly the inheritors of mankind. They developed weapons, arming those who patrolled the walls. Any of their own kind who came too close was simply eliminated. To prevent wars, some clans destroyed the land masses, allowing the ocean's sway to spread, and destroyed countless habitats, in ways that had not occurred for a long time. The ocean was the main body on Earth. The tension and use of weaponry eventually caused the waterways inland to become poisonous. Fish and other forms of aquatic life perished. Their bodies rose to the surface, and a secondary war would rage. The warfare scarred the land and the water, and there was a stalemate that lasted 200 years. An event occurred they, nor I, expected. Humanity had returned, breaking through the atmosphere with their large ship, sending their lost 8-legged children, their heirs, down into a deep bow, for their gods had returned. Landing and coming out into a strange world, an alien one, the place their ancestors had originated from. The spacecraft landed on the largest piece of Earth remaining, one of the final few, and the doors opened. They stared in amazement at what occurred during their absence. And as expected, there were communications that rose between them. An exchange of gifts. The humans gave the 8-legged flowers from a foreign plant, and in return, they received the remains of a leader lost to time. The sacred grave had been disturbed, and in humanity's eyes, desecrated, as had all their buildings now lost beneath the waves, and were damaged from the ocean. The peaceful moment passed, and war was declared. The 8-legs technology could not withstand against humanity's advancement. City after city fell. Shallows of bodies festered during the day, allowing the flies and smaller fish to feast. Then the fate of any survivors was worse. They were hunted and placed in cages with no hope of amnesty. Their control over the planet harshly and suddenly diminished. Humanity's time and space, being forced to survive against overwhelming odds, battling the greys and other forms of alien life, had awoken their drive for dominance, and their lust for death. The 8-legged were kept as livestock, knowing full well they once controlled the world, and no longer did they look up to humans. Without their medical advancements, they watched while their intelligence waned, unable to turn the tide. The locks and cages sealing them shut, not designed for the use of tentacles. The females soon perished after they gave birth to their eggs, like their ancestors did many, many generations ago. Without the correct amount of food, they gradually reduced in size and returned to what they were back in the day. It was not my action, and I merely watched it unfold. The 8-legged descendants, those who had escaped, returned to the water, speaking warnings of the ones who walked on the surface. The sun, the source of heat, grew warmer, causing the oceans to boil, and hurried the humans to build their homes underground. Their grand ship left on the surface of the earth, in ruins, only able to be accessed during the cool of night. The technology slowly failed, without the fuel needed to keep it going, and the education on how to use it declined. Without the wisdom of their ancestors, they resorted to tribal societies where water was considered a gift. Half the water disappeared, and only the deepest parts of the ocean remained, with most of the fresh water burnt away or having been diluted. The resource's rarity now meant humans had no excessive supply. The sun's intensity waned, and the humans stepped back onto the surface of the earth to find it different from what their immediate ancestors whispered. Still filled with great sands with small pockets of water and palm trees with mixed fruit, with twisting spines and a wet, rich center, the spawn of plants from a millennia ago. My bounty painstakingly returned, until the descendants no longer remained in the cave cities and headed out into their new world. first they lingered close to the safety of their homes, then drifted away to explore the new spaces. Tall, long-legged beasts roamed with animals now built to survive intense temperatures on the surface, with large ears for shade and wide feet to prevent them from falling into the sand. Water became tied to all their religions, and stories of it covering most of the Earth's surface were considered to be fairy tales. A time of abundance. The knowledge they had once returned from the stars disappeared, as well as how they originated on this planet. The eight-legged ones were forgotten. The ship itself now considered haunted with wicked spirits, and all technology to be unholy magic. Therefore, their technology was gone. Nothing lasts forever. A great drought that reigned for 1,000 years was relieved by the rains I sent. The storm clouds cast grey over the land before they released water down from the sky, filling the sands with puddles. Life has a way of surviving against all odds. They ran outside into the rain, playing in joyous celebration, only to have some of their number swept away by the growing floods. A blessing had turned into a plague. When the water eased, there were new sources of fresh water, making the survivors' life easier. Great lakes and rivers where water supported life and provided a source to cure their thirst. The exchange were those who had perished. A balance had to be maintained. Water was now seen as both a blessing and a curse. I turned my attention away from watching them and whatever they had planned, tending to the new creatures springing out. Thus far, none had gained the sentience nor intelligence required to become a rival. Human dominion was assured, and they spread out to every corner of the globe, creating their settlements above ground. They advanced as humanity tends to do, always stepping into their forefathers' shadows and taking up their positions of violence. A mistake here, a territory dispute there, and soon the nations of man were at war. Each newfound nation established their territory, the boundaries being rivers and waterways. It had worked for some time. They crossed in low areas, only to realize that another species, a mammal like them, but with a dolphin's tail and dreadful human arms, they would drag the unsuspecting into the depths of the water, feeding their own realm with the flesh from above. Large structures rose to the heavens, constructed out of metals plundered from the earth, and soon their waste piled up in massive pits, clogging the waterways, and toxins from their pollutants leaked out into the same waterways that had saved them. Cities had to be abandoned once more, from all the pollution, and animals lay on the ground with their bloated, decaying bellies, faces gaunt and eyeballs long turned to liquid. I sent rumbles through the earth to shake their buildings. A warning. They were going too far, yet they didn't stop. It was truly endless, and the renewal needed to begin. I cast down the flames. A cleansing purge of fire spread from above and below. The world ended in flames once more, as it was bound to. Burn them all to the ground. And that is the story. Thank you for listening, and let me know what you thought. Who or what do you think the entity in the story is? Do you think humanity would rise again, or will they fall? Let me know what you thought in the comment section down below. Did you enjoy it? Not your thing? Let me know. Also, if you want to support my work and gain extra perks, consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. Look at them! Look at all these amazing people. Thank you so much. If you would like to join their ranks, check out the link in the description. There is also merch, social medias, and all that good stuff. Stay safe, my little spooklings. And remember, I'll be watching you.